The 2010 Chile earthquake was one of the most powerful earthquakes in recent history. It occurred off the coast of central Chile on Saturday, February 27, 2010 at 3:34 in the morning local time. The earthquake had a magnitude of 8.8 and shook the region for about 3 minutes. It was felt across 6 Chilean regions, from Valparaiso in the north to Araucanía in the south, affecting nearly 80% of the country's population. This earthquake was the largest to hit Chile since the devastating 19 Valdivia earthquake, which remains the most powerful earthquake ever recorded. As with previous quakes, this disaster left a lasting mark on the country's landscape and its people. The epicenter of the earthquake was located off the coast of Pelujue, a small town in the Mall region. The earthquake was also felt as far away as Buenos Aires, Argentina, and even in parts of southern Peru. Chile's capital, Santiago, experienced intense shaking as well, though the worst damage occurred closer to the epicenter, particularly in the city of Concepción. This earthquake, along with the resulting tsunami, had far-reaching consequences not only for Chile but also for distant locations like California and Japan. Warnings were issued across 53 countries in preparation for the tsunami's arrival. Chile is situated on the boundary between 2 tectonic plates, the Nazca and South American plates, making it particularly vulnerable to these types of natural disasters. The earthquake that struck Chile on February 27, 2010, formed along the converging boundary of the Nazca and South American tectonic plates. These plates have been moving toward each other for millions of years, creating what is known as a subduction zone. In this case, the Nazca plate is slowly being pushed underneath the South American plate at a rate of about 80 millimeters per year. Over time, pressure builds up along this fault line until it is released in the form of a massive earthquake. The 2010 Chile earthquake was the result of many years of accumulated stress between these 2 plates, finally releasing in a sudden and violent event. Before the earthquake, Chile had experienced several smaller tremors, but there was no clear indication that a major quake was imminent. Preparations for earthquakes in Chile were already part of life, as the country sits on one of the most active seismic zones in the world. People were accustomed to earthquake drills and preparedness measures. However, nothing could fully prepare them for the scale of destruction that was about to unfold. On the night of the earthquake, people in the affected areas were asleep when the ground began to shake violently. Buildings swayed, roads cracked, and the sound of crumbling structures filled the air as the earthquake continued for nearly 3 minutes, followed by strong aftershocks. As the earthquake struck, it unleashed unimaginable destruction across central Chile. The hardest hit areas included the cities of Concepción, Arauco, and Coronel, which experienced the strongest shaking. In these areas, buildings collapsed, roads were destroyed, and entire communities were cut off from outside help. The capital city, Santiago, also suffered significant damage, though it was less severe than in other regions. The intense shaking caused massive blackouts, leaving 93% of the Chilean population without power. Communication lines were disrupted, making it difficult for people to contact loved ones or get emergency assistance. The earthquake also triggered a tsunami that devastated coastal towns, including the port city of Talcahuano. Waves crashed onto the shores, sweeping away homes, boats, and vehicles. The tsunami warnings issued across the Pacific helped prevent further loss of life, but some areas were caught off guard. Chilean officials later estimated that the combination of the earthquake and tsunami had left over 500 people dead, 25 missing, and countless others injured. The total economic losses were staggering, with estimates ranging between $15 and $30 billion. Coastal communities were particularly vulnerable, and their recovery would take years. In the immediate aftermath of the earthquake, the destruction was overwhelming. Entire towns lay in ruins, and many people were left homeless. Roughly 9% of the population in the affected areas lost their homes, and for days, thousands of people slept outside, afraid to return to their damaged buildings due to the threat of aftershocks. The government declared a state of catastrophe, and President Michelle Bachelet deployed military troops to restore order and assist in the rescue and relief efforts. Emergency services scrambled to provide aid to the injured and stranded, while volunteers and international organizations joined in the recovery efforts. The earthquake had a profound impact on Chile's natural environment. Coastal regions experienced significant changes, with some areas uplifted by up to 3 meters. These shifts caused new land masses to emerge, altering the local landscape permanently. The powerful earthquake also shifted entire cities. For example, Santiago moved nearly 28 centimeters to the west, while the city of Concepción shifted over 3 meters. In addition to the devastation of buildings and infrastructure, the earthquake caused massive damage to nature, displacing wildlife and destroying ecosystems along the coast. The 2010 Chile earthquake had a lasting impact on the country and the world. It was one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded, and its effects were felt far beyond Chile's borders. The disaster highlighted the importance of preparedness in earthquake-prone regions, and Chile's response to the earthquake demonstrated the resilience of its people. Although the recovery process was long and difficult, the country eventually rebuilt much of what was lost, and lessons were learned that would help improve future responses to similar disasters. In the years since the earthquake, Chile has continued to strengthen its infrastructure and emergency systems, ensuring that it is better prepared for the next major seismic event. The 2010 earthquake served as a reminder of the country's vulnerability to natural disasters, but also its capacity for recovery. For the families who lost loved ones, the earthquake remains a tragic memory, while for others it stands as a testament to the strength and unity that emerged in the face of one of the most powerful earthquakes in modern history. Typhoon Nina, also known locally as Typhoon Bibeng, remains one of the most devastating storms in the history of Asia. This catastrophic event took place in early August of 1975 and became notorious not just for its strength, but for the extraordinary loss of life and destruction it caused. Before it made landfall, Typhoon Nina had already gained a reputation as a fierce and unpredictable tropical cyclone in the western Pacific Ocean, showing signs early on that it could become a catastrophic storm. The storm first began as a tropical disturbance off the coast of Guam. Warm sea surface temperatures and favorable atmospheric conditions quickly allowed the system to strengthen, and by the first few days of August, it had developed into a tropical storm. As it moved westward, heading toward the Philippines, Typhoon Nina continued to grow in size and intensity. Meteorologists tracked its progress closely, issuing early warnings to the regions in its path. Despite these warnings, the sheer power of the storm was beyond what most could imagine at the time. By the time Nina reached typhoon status, its wind speeds had accelerated dramatically. Reports later estimated that the winds at the center of the storm exceeded 120 miles per hour. As it barreled closer to the archipelago, the people of the Philippines braced for impact. The storm was moving fast, its wide wind field sweeping across the sea, pushing massive storm surges toward the coastal areas. On August 6, 1975, Typhoon Nina made landfall on Luzon, the largest and most populous island in the Philippines. It slammed into the northern regions with incredible force, bringing torrential rains, powerful gusts, and life-threatening storm surges that overwhelmed entire communities. The rains were so heavy that they caused massive flooding within hours of the storm's arrival. Coastal villages were some of the first to feel the brunt of the storm, with homes, businesses, and crops being swept away by the winds and water. But what made Typhoon Nina especially catastrophic was not just the immediate damage. As it moved inland, it triggered a series of events that would turn this typhoon into one of the most tragic natural disasters in the nation's history. After wreaking havoc in the Philippines, Typhoon Nina continued on its deadly path, leaving widespread devastation in its wake. But the storm was far from over, and its next target was even more populous. After crossing the island of Luzon, Nina weakened slightly as it moved into the South China Sea. However, the warm waters there allowed the storm to quickly regain strength, setting its sights on the southeastern coast of China. What started as a disaster for the Philippines was about to become an international catastrophe impacting millions across Asia. As the storm gained momentum, the people of China were ill-prepared for the scale of destruction that was about to strike. By early August, weather agencies in China had issued warnings for the coastal provinces, urging citizens to brace for severe flooding and landslides. Despite these warnings, the country's infrastructure, especially in rural areas, was not equipped to handle the sheer power of the approaching typhoon. On August 8, Typhoon Nina made landfall in mainland China, striking the Fujian province with full force. The winds, exceeding 120 miles per hour, tore through cities and villages alike. Entire towns were submerged as torrential rains flooded rivers, causing them to overflow and swallow everything in their path. Farmlands were destroyed, homes were flattened, and roads became impassable due to mudslides and debris. What made Nina particularly deadly in China was the failure of several dams, including the infamous collapse of the Banqiao Dam, which led to one of the deadliest dam failures in history. The Banqiao Dam, located in the Henan province, had been built to withstand massive floods, but it was no match for the intensity of Typhoon Nina. As the storm dumped massive amounts of rain over the region, water levels in the dam rose uncontrollably. On the night of August 8th, the dam burst, releasing a wave of water that wiped out entire villages downstream. The resulting flood created a cascade of destruction, taking the lives of tens of thousands of people and leaving hundreds of thousands homeless. The failure of the dam was a turning point in the disaster as the floodwaters swept through the countryside, causing widespread chaos and loss of life. But the devastation didn't stop in China. Typhoon Nina's immense power affected other countries in the region as well. Taiwan, which was in the storm's direct path as it moved northward, faced heavy rains and strong winds that caused significant damage to infrastructure and agriculture. Vietnam and Laos also experienced residual effects from the typhoon, with torrential rains flooding rural areas and leaving communities stranded without food or clean water for days. In all, Typhoon Nina was a regional disaster affecting not only the Philippines, but also much of East and Southeast Asia. The scale of the destruction extended far beyond what anyone could have anticipated, with the storm leaving a lasting legacy in every country it touched. As the winds died down and the rain began to taper off, the true extent of Typhoon Nina's devastation became evident. Survivors emerged from the wreckage to find their homes destroyed and their communities in ruins. In the Philippines, the recovery efforts began almost immediately, but the sheer scale of destruction made it an uphill battle. Government agencies, alongside international organizations, mobilized to provide assistance to those affected. However, the challenges were immense, with communication lines down and roads blocked by debris, hampering relief efforts. In the Philippines, the government declared a state of emergency in the hardest-hit areas. Rescue teams were dispatched to remote locations where entire villages had been swept away and many communities were cut off from aid. Local volunteers, often risking their own safety, joined the efforts to locate survivors trapped under the rubble or stranded in isolated areas. Relief centers were set up to provide food, water, and medical assistance, but the resources quickly became strained as more people sought help. The United Nations stepped in, coordinating an international relief effort that brought supplies and aid workers from around the globe. Countries such as Japan, the United States, and Australia sent planes filled with food, medical supplies, and equipment to aid in the recovery. Non-governmental organizations also played a critical role, setting up shelters and providing essential services to those displaced by the storm. As the focus shifted to recovery in the Philippines, the situation in China became a pressing concern. With the Banqiao Dam disaster, the Chinese government faced an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. The immediate priority was to search for survivors and provide medical care to the injured. Rescue teams were deployed to the hardest-hit areas, where entire neighborhoods were submerged. Reports indicated that local hospitals were overwhelmed, struggling to care for the thousands injured in the disaster. In the wake of Typhoon Nina, the Chinese government launched a comprehensive recovery and rebuilding plan. Emergency funds were allocated to help communities recover and rebuild infrastructure. Schools, hospitals, and homes were prioritized for reconstruction, but the task was daunting. The government also faced scrutiny over the failure of the dam, prompting investigations into the quality of construction and maintenance practices that led to such a catastrophic failure. In Taiwan, Vietnam, and Laos, recovery efforts were underway as well. Local governments worked to restore power and clean up debris, but the damage to agriculture was significant, with crops destroyed and livelihoods lost. Farmers faced an uncertain future, and many communities struggled to access clean water and food supplies. In response to the regional crisis, neighboring countries also offered assistance, sharing resources and expertise to aid recovery efforts across borders. The disaster brought attention to the broader issue of climate resilience in the region. Experts and government officials began to discuss the need for better disaster preparedness, improved infrastructure, and more robust emergency response systems to mitigate the impacts of future storms. Typhoon Nina served as a harsh reminder of the vulnerability of coastal and riverine communities to the increasing frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, prompting calls for action at both local and international levels. As the weeks turned into months, the survivors of Typhoon Nina slowly began to rebuild their lives amidst the wreckage, united by their shared experience of loss and resilience. The typhoon left an indelible mark on the hearts and minds of those who lived through it, reminding them of the power of nature and the strength of community in the face of adversity. As the dust began to settle from the immediate chaos following Typhoon Nina, the region started to reflect on the lessons learned from this devastating storm. In the Philippines, discussions emerged regarding the need for stronger building codes and infrastructure improvements to withstand future typhoons. The government began collaborating with international engineering firms and disaster management organizations to assess existing structures and develop a comprehensive plan to reinforce vulnerable areas. Education on disaster preparedness became a priority as communities recognized the importance of being equipped with the knowledge and tools to respond effectively to future emergencies. Schools incorporated disaster response training into their curricula, teaching children and their families how to prepare for severe weather events, identify safe shelters, and create emergency plans. Community workshops were organized, where local leaders shared insights on resilience and recovery, fostering a culture of preparedness. In China, the Banqiao Dam disaster prompted a nationwide reevaluation of dam safety and flood management systems. The government initiated rigorous inspections of all major dams, implementing stricter regulations and maintenance schedules to prevent similar catastrophes. Public discussions around environmental sustainability gained momentum as citizens and officials alike began to understand the need for responsible management of natural resources and the impact of urban development on flood risks. The experience of Typhoon Nina also highlighted the interconnectedness of countries in the region when facing natural disasters. Regional cooperation became a focal point, with leaders from the Philippines, China, Taiwan, and other affected nations meeting to discuss joint initiatives for disaster response and recovery. They explored the establishment of a regional disaster management framework that would facilitate information sharing, resource allocation, and collaborative training exercises. In the wake of the typhoon, the economy of the affected regions took a significant hit. Agriculture suffered tremendously, particularly in the Philippines, where rice and other staple crops were destroyed. Farmers struggled to recover, leading to food shortages and increased prices. Local governments, alongside international aid organizations, implemented programs to provide financial assistance and resources to farmers to help them rebuild their livelihoods. The importance of crop diversification and sustainable agricultural practices became apparent as communities sought to create more resilient farming systems, less vulnerable to extreme weather. The psychological toll of Typhoon Nina also became evident as time passed. Many survivors struggled with the trauma of loss and displacement, and mental health services became a crucial aspect of recovery efforts. Organizations trained mental health professionals to support affected individuals, providing counseling and therapy to help communities heal. The process of recovery was not just physical, but also emotional, as people learned to cope with the lasting impacts of the disaster. As the years went by, the lessons learned from Typhoon Nina shaped policy decisions and community initiatives across the region. The storm served as a wake-up call to governments, organizations, and individuals about the urgent need for disaster preparedness and resilience in the face of a changing climate. Communities became advocates for their own safety, demanding better infrastructure and more robust emergency response systems, fostering a sense of agency and empowerment. In retrospect, Typhoon Nina was a catalyst for change, driving a shift in how the region approached disaster risk management. It underscored the significance of preparedness, community engagement, and international cooperation in building a more resilient future. The memories of the storm remained vivid, a poignant reminder of nature's power and the enduring strength of those who faced its wrath. As the years passed since Typhoon Nina, communities across the affected regions continued to rebuild and reflect on the profound impact of that catastrophic event. The scars left by the typhoon remained etched in the landscape and in the hearts of those who experienced its fury, serving as a constant reminder of the vulnerability faced by populations in disaster-prone areas. Yet, amidst the memories of loss and devastation, stories of resilience and recovery emerged, illustrating the indomitable spirit of those who weathered the storm. In the Philippines, the experience of Typhoon Nina ignited a sense of unity among communities. Neighborhoods that had once been fragmented began to work together, sharing resources, knowledge, and support in ways that had not been seen before. Local organizations, strengthened by the shared experience of loss, formed networks to assist those still struggling to regain stability. Community leaders organized regular meetings to discuss ongoing challenges, ensuring that everyone had a voice in shaping their recovery and future preparedness plans. The government's commitment to improving infrastructure gained momentum, with investments made in roads, bridges, and evacuation centers designed to withstand future storms. Communities began to embrace innovative technologies such as early warning systems and mobile apps to receive real-time updates on severe weather. This integration of technology into disaster management significantly enhanced the region's ability to respond swiftly to warnings and minimize potential loss of life and property. In China, the lessons learned from the Banqiao Dam disaster prompted a national discourse on sustainable development. The emphasis on responsible urban planning and environmental conservation became central to discussions around infrastructure projects. Citizens began to advocate for policies that prioritized the environment, recognizing the delicate balance between development and nature. The government responded with initiatives aimed at restoring natural ecosystems and investing in green infrastructure to mitigate the impacts of future flooding. Throughout the region, the bonds forged in the aftermath of Typhoon Nina contributed to a greater understanding of the importance of international cooperation in disaster management. Countries across Asia began to share knowledge, resources, and best practices, forming partnerships that transcended borders. Joint training exercises and simulation drills were organized to prepare for future natural disasters, fostering a sense of solidarity and shared responsibility among nations. As communities rebuilt, there was a renewed focus on mental health support. Survivors who had endured trauma received the necessary resources to process their experiences and find healing. Mental health professionals worked tirelessly to ensure that individuals felt supported and understood, facilitating community workshops that emphasized the importance of emotional well-being. The collective healing process became a testament to the strength of community bonds as people learned to lean on one another for support. In schools, children who had lived through Typhoon Nina were empowered to become advocates for disaster preparedness. Educational programs incorporated lessons about climate change, environmental stewardship, and safety protocols, ensuring that the next generation would be better equipped to face the challenges posed by natural disasters. Young voices emerge as powerful agents of change, driving conversations about sustainability and resilience within their communities. As Typhoon Nina faded into the past, its legacy continued to shape policies, practices, and mindsets across the region. The storm had been a devastating event, but it also served as a catalyst for transformation, prompting societies to confront their vulnerabilities and take proactive steps toward building a safer, more resilient future. In reflection, Typhoon Nina taught invaluable lessons about the power of community, the importance of preparedness, and the need for collective action in the face of adversity. As people moved forward, they carried with them the memories of those who had been lost, honoring their stories by creating a future that prioritized safety, resilience, and unity. The echoes of Typhoon Nina would forever resonate in the hearts of those who lived through it, reminding them that even in the face of nature's fury, hope and strength could rise anew. Hurricane Fifi was a devastating natural disaster that hit Central America, especially Honduras, in September 1974. It originated as a tropical wave off the coast of Africa on September 8th, slowly developing as it moved across the Atlantic Ocean. By September 14th, it had turned into a tropical depression near Haiti. Over the next few days, Fifi gained strength, eventually becoming a powerful hurricane. This storm struck several countries along its path, but Honduras experienced the worst of its destruction. When Fifi made landfall on September 18th, it brought with it massive rainfall, intense winds, and severe flooding. Honduras was unprepared for the level of devastation it caused. Entire towns and villages were swept away, and the storm's impact on the country was catastrophic. In total, Fifi claimed the lives of thousands of people and left tens of thousands homeless. It stands as one of the deadliest hurricanes in history, a tragedy that forever changed the regions it affected. Hurricane Fifi's formation began as a tropical wave that emerged off the coast of West Africa on September 8, 1974. As this system traveled across the Atlantic Ocean, conditions allowed it to gradually intensify. By September 14th, it had developed into a tropical depression near the Caribbean, just east of Haiti. Warm ocean temperatures and favorable atmospheric conditions contributed to its rapid growth, transforming it into a tropical storm within a day. By September 16th, Fifi reached hurricane strength as it moved through the Caribbean Sea. Early warnings were issued, but many of the areas in its path, especially in Central America, had limited resources for proper preparation. Fifi brought strong winds and heavy rain as it swept over the northern coast of Honduras and other neighboring countries, although it didn't directly hit larger nations like Cuba or the Dominican Republic. The storm caused flooding and minor damage in these regions. Despite its early stages being somewhat less destructive than anticipated, the true impact of Hurricane Fifi became evident as it approached Central America. The combination of its increasing strength and the region's mountainous terrain meant that the storm's rains would soon lead to catastrophic flooding. With the storm gaining momentum, people in Honduras, Guatemala, and other nearby countries began to brace for what was coming. As Hurricane Fifi made landfall in Honduras on September 18, 1974, its true devastation began to unfold. The storm slammed into the northern coast of the country, unleashing torrential rains, powerful winds, and destructive storm surges. Coastal towns and villages were the first to be hit, with homes and infrastructure completely destroyed by the hurricane's intensity. Winds reached up to 110 km/h, tearing apart buildings and uprooting trees as the storm continued inland. However, it was the catastrophic flooding that caused the most widespread damage. The mountainous terrain of Honduras and neighboring Guatemala amplified the storm's effects as the heavy rains turned rivers into torrents, triggering landslides and flash floods. Entire villages were submerged, and many people were caught off guard by the speed at which the water levels rose. Roads, bridges, and communication lines were washed away, leaving communities completely isolated. In the wake of the storm, thousands of people were left homeless, and the death toll began to rise as rescue efforts were hindered by the destruction. Rivers overflowed, and fertile farmlands were wiped out, threatening food supplies in the already impoverished region. While Honduras bore the brunt of Fifi's wrath, other Central American countries like Guatemala, Nicaragua, and Belize also suffered severe flooding and damage. In the aftermath of Hurricane Fifi, the scale of devastation became even more apparent. Entire communities were wiped out, and the death toll soared, with estimates suggesting that up to 8,000 people lost their lives. Thousands more were missing or injured, and the number of displaced families was staggering. With homes, infrastructure, and farmland destroyed, the region faced an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. Efforts to provide aid were slow and complicated by the destruction of roads and communication networks. Helicopters and boats were used to reach isolated villages, delivering food, water, and medical supplies. International aid poured in, with countries and organizations offering support in the form of financial donations, medical teams, and emergency supplies. However, the scale of the disaster overwhelmed local and international efforts as the region struggled to cope with the immediate needs of survivors. The economic impact was equally severe. Agriculture, a vital part of the economy in Honduras and neighboring countries, was decimated by the floods. Crops were washed away, livestock drowned, and entire plantations were ruined, threatening food security for months to come. The cost of rebuilding homes, roads, and other infrastructure was astronomical, setting the region back by years in terms of development. The people of Honduras and other affected areas were left to grapple with the long-term consequences of Fifi as the rebuilding process began slowly and the emotional toll of the disaster weighed heavily on the survivors. Hurricane Fifi left a profound mark on Honduras and the surrounding region, with its devastating aftermath affecting the area for years to come. The storm highlighted the vulnerabilities of countries with limited infrastructure and resources to handle such natural disasters. Though international aid played a crucial role in the initial recovery efforts, the long-term rebuilding process was slow and challenging. Many survivors were left to rebuild their lives with little support, and entire communities had to be relocated to safer areas due to the extensive damage. In the years following the hurricane, steps were taken to improve disaster preparedness in Central America. Governments in the region began to focus more on creating better warning systems, strengthening infrastructure, and developing disaster response plans to prevent such widespread devastation in the future. However, the economic and social recovery was slow, with many families continuing to feel the ripple effects of Fifi's destruction for decades. The legacy of Hurricane Fifi serves as a reminder of the power of nature and the importance of preparedness in the face of such catastrophic events. The storm's lasting impact not only reshaped the physical landscape of Honduras, but also the lives of its people, leaving behind stories of survival, loss, and resilience.